you get maybe 50 feet away from someone, they're coming up behind you, you just turn that back, you might hit a nice spread of several of them or their horses, and immediately stop them in their tracks and make it to safety.
Could you imagine the look on the face of the guy robbing the coach, this staring them in the face? It's a standard blunderbuss, but tell them why this is different.
So what really makes this piece different?
Welcome back to another episode of History Roundtable. You can obviously see we don't need a tray. This is just a different animal altogether. So we want to kind of jump right into it. So Josh, I'm going to pass the baton to you to kind of tell the origin story of how this came to be in front of us.
Absolutely. Well, it all started from, once again, a contact that I've got over in Europe. And this guy, I've been buying all sorts of unique relics. Most of them never left Europe. So he has a lot of the run-of-the-mill stuff that we see all the time, but every once in a while he gets something like this. And as soon as I saw that side profile and why do we have two different styles of metal on the barrel and what else is going on with this? It was so ornate, I had to buy it. And I said it first, like I always do. I consult the master. And this guy I know said, you should definitely pick that up because that's something you really don't see every day. We come across a lot of blunderbusses, and if you look online, you'll find one fairly easily. But nothing quite like this. These are few and far between.
Well, and let's kind of show one of the reasons why this is much different than others, simply by turning it this way. You'll notice the muzzle is much different than most of your regular average blunderbusses because it's just a round flared opening.
Yeah.
This is completely different. This is called an elliptical muzzle or a frogmouth. Hence that rounded section is squished down to be more horizontal. Now, the interesting part regarding the ballistics of this, because I've done lots of testing out on the field about as far as how much distance would a shot. In other words, when you fired the weapon, did you want to wait 20 yards away, 30 yards away, 10 yards away, depending on what you're shooting?
Now, if you love all the content that you're seeing here, and you're like, I gotta get more. I wanna see behind the scenes.
Here we are. Finally. We're in a undisclosed private location up somewhere in the mountains in California.
Well, head over to Patreon. That is where we're going to be showing first looks, behind the scenes, unboxing videos. Might even see some stuff for sale on there that you might not see anywhere else, and find us going to really cool places. So once again, head to Patreon. I'm Josh. This is Sean. Hope to see you there.
Take care, guys.
Oh, I can't wait to see that, Tony.
So we set up targets where we actually had, when I had the Nat Geo show, a big, huge piece of plywood, and it was just riddled with eggs. So when we shot the blunderbuss with we fired BBs out of it. So imagine 100 BBs going out of a flared barrel. Now, the ballistics of this should be that all those BBs are going to scatter when they leave the end of the muzzle.
Yeah.
We proved it because at different intervals and distance, that shot pattern spread out more and more and more. And you could definitely tell because of all the eggs that were hit. So this type of ballistics testing I've never done before, where you have this elliptical. So that would tell you or tell me that the shot pattern will be spread out like this because of the flaring and the design of the barrel. The different there's so many different things going on here as opposed to regular blunderbuss.
Right.
It's hard to know where to go first. But since we're talking about the barrel, the other thing you're going to notice is that there's two colors, being that it's brass and iron.
Yeah.
So I have encountered barrels that have, it's an iron barrel with maybe decorative brass overlay. This barrel is made in two parts. So, that is a head scratcher to me because I love the ingenuity and the design element. But I always would question when you're joining two pieces of metal together, that's one thing if it's iron and iron.
Yeah.
But when you're joining two different kinds of metal, iron and brass, how does that work? And again, this is handmade. So here's a technology of fusing these two metals together that I am not aware of how they did it.
Yeah.
Because how do you get the temperature that high to then join these two together to where they're going to meld, they're going to stick together. But how do you dance that dance to where you've got it hot enough to meld together, but yet not just melt entirely?
And then also be strong enough to not blow up in your hands.
Thank you. Thank you. So then my question goes to that. The structural integrity of these two parts being put together. The other part you have to also understand is that the breech, this barrel was completely just a pipe at one time. So to seal off the one end at the breech, it's threaded, basically drilled and tapped. Then the breech is screwed into place, then solid. It's not coming out unless you really force it. So that I'm pretty secure about. I gotta say, if somebody were to say, hey, would you test fire this? I would have to really scrutinize this joint right here.
Yeah.
Because that's where the pressure is gonna build up. And if there's gonna be a weakness, it's gonna be there.
Yeah.
But okay, I've said my piece about the fear factor. It is still completely intact. So obviously, and I can tell you just by everything I'm seeing here, this was fired. And not just fired once or twice, it was fired a lot.
Yeah.
So I would actually have to have a bore scope.
I was gonna say.
To go and look on the inside to see what am I not seeing here?
Yeah.
That would maybe put me at ease. So what I'm thinking is maybe on the interior, what we're not seeing is that there is a continuation of this iron barrel that goes forward a little bit more, and this brass is just a sleeve that goes over that. Instead of two flat walls being joined, it's a sleeve going one over the other. That would make more sense to me. And the structural integrity would still be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, definitely.
But so addressing that, country of origin, okay, typically this style, and we still haven't revealed one of the most important parts of this, is either Italian or French. So I'm going to let you show the really kind of surprising thing.
Okay.
And then, but also to be very clear, when this arrived, it didn't look like this.
No, we actually ended up spending a better part of an entire day taking it apart, and then another day cleaning it professionally and really conserving the parts. It was a labor of love. It needed, once we got behind the beauty of the outside, there were some problems.
There always are.
But it was nothing we couldn't tackle with the tools we had at hand. And we fortunately didn't have to replace any parts. We were able to do everything with original, as you see here, and just fix up some stuff.
Right, adjust some things and show. Now, okay, it's a standard blunderbuss, but tell them why this is different.
So what really makes this piece different is right here. You're gonna see this brass ring. Well, there's a button at the top, and you press it. It is a collapsing or a folding stock. Look how cool that thing is. I mean,
of course, you're probably wondering, well, all right, that's cool, but why? Well, think about it. If you're traveling and you needed to condense this weapon, what better way than to do this? And let me paint you even a bigger, broader picture. If you're a person of means and need to travel from, say, Paris to London, you're going to go by coach. Well, back in that period, it was very lucrative to be called what what they called back then a highwayman. So a highwayman was basically a thief, a robber that would lay in wait in the wood line, tree lines on these, dirt roads, waiting for what hopefully is a wealthy person traveling in a carriage. And these guys would descend, stop the carriage at Musket Point, Blunderbuss Point, or whatever to rob the coach. Well, if I were the guy traveling in the coach, I would want to have one of these, as well as probably a couple of pistols and what have you. Could you imagine the look on the face of the guy robbing the coach when they open the door and they've got this staring them in the face? And what do I mean by that? That, staring you in the face, would be a pretty good deterrent. And my God, if you really wanted to push the envelope, the guy running the carriage, driving the carriage, he's armed. And hopefully you've got somebody else within the carriage that's also armed.
Right.
Because they're going to, if it's usually it's not just one guy, they're going to attack from all sides.
Of course.
But this is an amazing deterrent because, again, looking down that barrel.
Yeah.
I don't want to know what's coming out of.
Well, and if we ended up testing this based on the elliptical Frogmouth style barrel, it would also make sense. If you're getting several highwaymen coming on horseback, you want something more, horizontal in nature, something to more fan out a shot.
Yes.
You get maybe 50 feet away from someone, they're coming up behind you, you just turn that back, you might hit a nice spread of several of them or their horses and immediately stop them in their tracks and make it to safety.
But now always remember, this was one shot.
Yeah.
You had to make it count. So because you had to have time and your wits about you to reload these things.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many accounts I've read about where in the heat of battle, whether you're on a ship or at a battlefield, and you're trying to remember how to work these weapons in the midst of the chaos of all this stuff flying by you and people, dying all over. It's just, I don't know how they did it. I mean, they obviously did.
Yeah.
But oh my God, to put yourself back in that time, unbelievable.
Yeah.
So we took a lot of time, care, and effort. And again, this comes with experience and being taught by people that have been taught by the proper authorities throughout their careers. So it's not like we're just going to a hardware store and looking at some chemicals, that might clean it up. No, there is a finesse to this. It's all about life experience and what to do and what not to do. And everybody's going to have their own opinion about restoring something. And this is not just, dedicated to antique firearms. It goes across the board with collectibles, whether it's a classic car and then when it comes down to coins, well, leave them alone, or do you trust a professional, facility to conserve that coin and clean it, by proper methods.
Right.
So we have to abide by a code of ethics because I was taught a certain way through museum people I work with that there are certain things you want to restore and then certain things you just want to leave alone. This was one of those categories that it just needed a little bit. And basically what we did was removed any of the surface metal cancers, being rust, what have you. We didn't do anything really to the wood other than just clean it and preserve it with wood preservatives. The lock, we completely disassembled it and cleaned all the dirt, grime, and if there was any adjustments that were needed, which thankfully there really weren't.
Yeah, there wasn't.
We just cleaned it, but we didn't. And when I say clean it, it's just cleaning the dirt and debris as you would back in the day. We're not removing or intentionally trying to remove the evidence and proof of age, which is the patina. So in doing this, you have to also recognize that, okay, well, some of the rust may have been more concentrated in areas than others. So how do you clean that to where when you are finished, it all looks uniform and doesn't look like you attacked one area, more so than the others? And that, again, is the finesse, and that comes with time and just really, listening to professionals that have been doing this all their lives. And this is what I'm doing with this guy.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to pass down these skills because it's a lost art. And, it's not for everybody, and it's very time consuming. But I will tell you this, it is so rewarding when I can say I have brought something back from the dead. And let me tell you, I have been given some amazing challenges to where I have been given maybe half of one of these by a museum. And they go, you know, we really would like to have this thing restored back to a condition where we can display it. And let me tell you, some of these jobs over the years have been a little tricky, to say the least, but they all worked out. And I can't ever replace that type of an experience.
Yeah.
So, you know, when we first, you know, met and you expressed an interest in this, I'm like, oh my God, dude, you're at the right place at the right time, because it's all in here.
Yeah.
And without it passed on to somebody else, it gets lost.
Yeah.
So this is why we're kind of doing this. And it may be long-winded, but maybe now you'll understand a little bit more of why we do what we do. Because again, some of these things, when they come to us, are not that attractive and not that desirable. But with a little ingenuity and know-how and moral compass guidance on what to do and what not to do, we can bring these things back to life. Not all, but a lot of them, to where they're now back to a stable state, they're collectible now, and they have more value. Because we can explain what we've done under full transparency. We're not trying to hide anything. What's the point? You know, we're just bringing it back to where, hey, this is really something cool to own now and protect for future generations. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, something we always end up saying, I picked it up from you, but we truly are custodians of history. Yeah. And a lot of the stuff, specifically, you know, what I've been learning for the restoration side, you don't learn that in a book. You'll learn pieces, but come on.
It's not like you can go to the College of Antique Gun Restoration. You know, there are ways to do it, but it's not for everybody, and it's very, very challenging because it is a lifelong dedication. I can't tell you. I mean, I started when I was 10 years old, listening to the older guys going, hey, this is what not to do, what not to do.
Yeah.
And of course I made my own mistakes. That's how that's going through the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
But you learn from those mistakes, you move on, you pass on that good knowledge to the next generation.
Yeah.
So lots of this is still being done in Europe because there's so much history there. Here in this country, yes, we are focused and we love our history, but sometimes it gets clouded and maybe not as much emphasis that should be placed on certain time periods in history. It's kind of, the waters are muddied right now. But I really want to emphasize that this is a 250th anniversary year of the American Revolutionary War. So this is a topic I'm going to be talking a lot about because it needs to be talked about.
No.
You know, a lot of those early fundamentals of our founding fathers, you know, still hold true today because it's based on common sense. I don't want to get political here. I'm just talking here.
Yeah.
So those roots are so important. You know, the basic fundamentals, the semantics, of course, everybody's going to debate. But these types of things were so important in achieving that freedom.
Yeah.
So, and again, I don't want to divide the line here, but wherever you guys stand on firearms in general or weapons in general, these are tools. And without them, we couldn't have achieved what we have achieved to gain our freedom. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't out there just fighting each other with broomsticks. You know?
They used boomsticks.
Boomsticks. Damn right, man. I was hoping you were going to catch up on that. So,
but what's, you know, the circle back, especially to we're, you know, looking at the time period of the American Revolution, would you say this kind of fits at least within a couple decades of that time period?
And the great thing, it's earlier.
It's earlier.
Yeah. So this is right at the middle of the 18th century. So chances are, you know, not even though it's not military, that's where you go, okay, well, let's just say this was made in 1750. Well, what happened after the year 1750 onwards? Where could this have been? Where could it have been used? You know, and that's where it's like, come on, man, talk to us, tell us. So you have to then go country of origin. Well, and then intents of purpose, why it was designed this way. So again, we already painted that picture.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing we probably haven't touched on, the cool factor. Well, just in the topic of blunderbusses,
Right.
where does this rate?
This is the coolest blunderbuss I've ever handled. I mean, there's bigger ones, there's smaller ones, there's more ornate ones, but this is the only one I've ever handled, and all the time we've got to play with all this stuff that has all these features. The folding stock, the belt hook on the side, the 2 types of metal here on the barrel.
All this decorative.
All the decorative work, which, and the other piece for me, if I'm going to give it a rating, a solid 10 out of 10, because I started when we were doing a restoration on this, there's pitting here in the metal. Obviously, no pitting on the brass. So my brain immediately went to thinking, okay, perhaps, let's say it was made in Italy, but maybe they were also taking inspiration from France because the trade going up to Marseille and those areas, maybe this was used on the deck of a ship. As many of these we saw, the brass wouldn't corrode at sea, so maybe
Glad that brought that up.
that's where some of the corrosion comes from. Because that kind of corrosion we don't often see from something that was regularly used on land, but something that was supposed
Unless
to
it was
be
neglected.
Right.
So,
But we didn't see that much
no. So,
indication that it was neglected. So
and I will also point out that merchant vessels, trade vessels, had to have their own ways of protection.
right.
So they're not going to have your typical military weapons. They're going to have whatever weapons they can get their hands on.
Right.
So there's no way I could tell you that this wasn't used on a ship.
Right.
There's no way I can tell you it was.
Yeah.
But like you pointed out, corrosion, sometimes little things, little clues will give you, maybe a possibility.
But it's neat to know that, first off, I got this in Europe. So there's a high chance it never left Europe. And the part of Europe I got it in wasn't involved in either France or Italy. But a lot of these things moved around and they shifted from town to town and collectors picked them up. But, just the idea that this could have been involved in the French Revolution, Napoleonic Wars, whether it was a home defense or a merchant's defense on a vessel or on a carriage, the stories that come from this, the ornateness of it, the ingenuity of having a folding stock for concealing, it paints us a great picture, a fantastic story that I think that whenever we take this to a show next, it's going to be gone. If somebody doesn't, contact us after this episode.
Because it is that unusual.
Yeah, find another one.
And the other thing is too, just the mechanics of it. You look at it when the stock folds down, that's one thing. But there's a screw within that if you wanted to take this part of the stock completely off, you remove one screw and now you can separate this and pack it into, even more of a tight space.
Yeah.
So it's just whoever was coming up with this design, kudos to you because it's different and you can conceal it.
Yeah.
The other thing I would like to point out is that, when we feature these things, we are also, vetting them. What do I mean by that? I'm going to point out to you if I see that there is something that should be pointed out. In other words, okay, this is from 1750, but maybe the frizzen here is a replacement from the 20th century. I would like to point that out to you. But here's the wonderful thing about this is that so many of the flintlocks, when the technology changed, so after the flintlock came the percussion era, where a lot of these flintlocks that were still in good shape were converted to the updated firing technology, which is the percussion cap. So how would they do that? They would leave the lock in place because it's obviously fits the stock. They would remove the hammer, the flintlock hammer, also known as the cock. They'd remove the frizzen spring, and they would just attach a bolster, which was like a little barrel with a percussion cap nipple on it. Then they replaced the hammer with a percussion hammer. So that was in vogue for about 60 years, where a lot of these older guns were converted. So what does that mean for value when you encounter those guns that have been altered? Well, it does affect the value. It does add a little bit to the history because it shows that even that gun was 100 years old when it was converted, they were still using it.
Yeah.
Well, here's the problem for me, is to make sure, because in modern times, especially at the bicentennial of the 200th anniversary of the American Revolutionary War, these weapons were super popular. And they were, being bought up by collectors, and most of the guns were converted to percussion because they were still being used. Well, then a bunch of crafty guys went, well, let's reconvert them back to their original state. Okay, now we're getting into the realm of, hey, is this Corvette a matching numbers car? Is the motor the original? So it's up to guys like me to then scrutinize what I'm looking at to make sure that this is in its original state. In other words, original flintlock is the term, as opposed to converted to percussion, or the other term, reconverted back to flintlock. Because there is a big difference in value, because it's not original. If it's original flint, it's worth more money. Now, there is also a subcategory about the quality of restoration of whoever did the reconversion. A proper gunsmith who does the reconversion is going to make a note of it somewhere within the gun, that the work was done on this date, even if it's a little piece of paper. That's the proper way to ensure that the next guy down the road isn't being misrepresented.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So when I say that this is a flintlock, I will now, for future sake, say this is an original flintlock.
Right.
So just so there's no, miscommunication or misunderstanding, because again, that does affect the value. And because people are showing us, well, hey, it looks like the one that you have, but then I have to point out, but please understand that yours has had this work done. And these parts are modern. So not everybody can discern and see these things.
Right.
And it can also be construed as, well, how do I know that you're telling me the truth? It's like, I don't know what to tell you, guy. It's like you called me.
Right.
If you don't like what I have to tell you, call somebody else.
Yeah.
I'm just giving it to you straight.
Yeah.
So these are just one element of what I deal with, what we deal with on a daily basis to scrutinize these things, because again, we want our customers to feel comfortable with what they're buying and know that they can trust what we are representing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So man, all together, after our little restoration that we did, knowing that it's all original, everything's here, what's the range of value for something like this?
Right out of the gate, $7,500 and up.
Yeah.
Just because of what it is. And all the different elements that we pointed out, and the fact that it's original flint, it hasn't been converted to percussion and then reconverted back. It kind of speaks for itself at this point.
It does. It's a statement piece at this point. I would, and I know you would, not advise to go out and take this to the range and fire this.
No. In fact, please, you will see us go to the range and do demonstrations of how these things worked. I do this for the educational purposes. I don't recommend anybody, whether you know what you're doing or not, despite what shows you've seen me on or heard or whatever, the value is always going to be there whether these things work or not. And I really want to make that clear.
Yeah.
We do the show of a demonstration so you don't have to run the risk of doing it yourself when you don't know what you're doing. Because trust me, even the guys that know what they're doing, things will happen that are out of our control. So why would you push the envelope? And if you really need to fire a black powder weapon, there is a myriad of companies out there that make reproductions just for that purpose, both from every technology, from matchlock, wheel lock, snap-ons, flintlock, percussion. It's all available. You don't need to use the originals.
Right. So all that being said, this would look fantastic on a desk,
Hell yeah.
cabinet, in your personal cave, wherever you want to put this. This is a display piece. This is to be enjoyed. Show it off to your friends, but not something to take out to the range.
And the other thing is that I can't overstate the discrepancy and the difference as far as when people look through the lens of artistic ability.
Yeah.
And I, again, not to knock a famous artist who paints unbelievable canvases, But please understand that you're dealing with one medium. You're dealing with a flat surface and the artist's ability to take a pigment and create a design, good, bad, or indifferent. It's art, right? Well, that's just one talent. You have to not only be that artist when making something like this, but now you're working in multi-mediums of material, wood, different types of metals, okay? And again, by hand, by candlelight or sunlight.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, to know your temperatures in making these parts and making them hardened or soft to accept sparks and flexibility for the springs.
And then to get the whole thing to work like a clock.
Please, okay? So my question to everybody out there is, here's a guy that knows, is an engineer, he is an artist, he can work wood, he can work metals, he can do incredible engraving, both high relief and low relief. And it boggles the mind to see that this is only worth $7,500, but yet a painting from the same period can bring hundreds of millions of dollars. There's a major disconnect here because this is a piece of art, just as that painting is, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And the technical ability to put both of those artists side by side, which one do you think is going to have more abilities than the other? Think about that.
Yeah.
But yet these are so undervalued. Yeah. Is it the negative connotation that, oh, it's also a weapon? I don't know. So it's kind of those things that the head scratcher.
Yeah.
But there are some guns out there that I still, they're breathtaking. They are just mounted in the most precious metals, gold and silver, platinum, and just encrusted with jewels.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that that's not in the same category as $1 million painting? I don't know.
Yeah.
And don't even get me started about the art that, 2 basketballs in a fish tank, and somebody pays $2 million for that. Okay, now we're going into the weeds.
Yeah. But something like this doesn't come around every day.
No.
It's exceptional to even find it, and in the condition we did get it in, I would say it was like that 85% of the way there, and it just needed that last little bit of elbow grease and know-how to keep it, preserve this piece for generations to come.
Exactly.
And that's really what we're doing here, is keeping history alive, one piece at a time.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, right? Well, and if you want to see a little bit more about our restoration process, you can check out my Instagram, Redbeard's Relics. That's where I've got a 3-part series where you just get to see a little bit about what we're doing in the workshop, just if you're curious to see a little bit more. But, anything else you have to say about this, Sean? Anything else that kind of stood out?
Oh, I could, but we'd be here for hours. I get diarrhea of the mouth, But anyway, hopefully we're making our points come across in a way that is palatable, in this crazy world that we're living in. We're ducking and diving, and but we love bringing history to you guys, and especially when we can have a tangible item to connect the dots. That's the mission.
Yeah.
So if you like this stuff, please subscribe. Help us help you. We'll bring more of this stuff to your attention.
Well, we'll see you on the next one.
History Roundtable, an all-new season. Don't forget to like and share your favorite episodes. And to learn more about the artifacts on the show, visit tortugatrading.com and commodorecoins.com. Till next time.